Food is all around us. It's no longer just in our kitchens and restaurants. It's on our phones, Instagram, YouTube. We use food as a reason to get together, celebrate, and experience. No matter if that experience is in your home or in a different city. I am your host, Scott Scher, and I'm here to talk about your favorite food and the people behind them. This is the I'd Eat That podcast.
Roasting smaller batches so that you can explore the same coffee in 2 or 3 different ways and then sort of dial it in from there.
Hey everyone, thank you for joining us today. We have an excellent episode. We have Corey Voelkel, the owner of the coffee shop Aveley Farms in Baltimore City. He's going to teach us how to roast coffee. Enjoy. Coffee roaster and owner of the coffee shop in Harbor East in Baltimore City, Aveley Farms. How are you doing today, Corey?
Doing well. Thanks for having me on. Excited to talk coffee.
Okay, perfect. How did you get started with roasting coffee?
Yeah, so I grew up in Towson, and after college, I moved out to San Diego. And throughout college and everything, I was sort of just sort of a typical college kid. Had coffee when I needed it. But towards the end, that's when I really started getting into coffee. And then after that, I moved to California. And within a few weeks of living in San Diego, there was a little roaster called Bird Rock Coffee Roasters out there. And I had a cup of coffee and it just sort of blew my mind. I've never tasted coffee like it. And that was sort of my first wow moment. Just the flavors, it was like an explosion in your mouth. And that really sort of piqued my interest. And from there, just started doing a little bit more research, and that eventually led to home roasting. And then, now today we opened up the shop earlier this year. So one thing sort of led to the next there.
What were some of the flavors that you tasted when you had that cup of coffee?
I actually remember it really vividly. It was a single origin from Guatemala, and it was an extremely bright and floral coffee. It was almost like strawberry sweetness in it and super acidic. It was just, I've never tasted that in coffee when you have, nothing against Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts, anything like that, but that's sort of the coffee profile that most people have come to know. And this was a craft roaster that it was really the first cup of coffee that I had and experienced that. So it was just like something so different that it sort of blew my mind. Can you
walk us through the coffee roasting process?
Yeah, sure. So there's a couple different ways of roasting. There's air roasting machines that just basically use hot air, like a popcorn maker that can roast it. There's drum roasters, which is what I have. I have a Diedrich IR12 is what the model is that I have, and it's called a drum roaster, and it's powered by natural gas. And basically what happens is coffee it's all a crop, so it's all green. It's very hard. It's not edible at all in its green form. To get it to its roasted form of sort of the typical coffee, the brown roasted coffee that we're used to, it goes in. And my Diedrich is a drum, like I said, so it's a big cast iron drum inside our machine that spins, and it has gas heaters that heat up the drum, and then that transfers heat to the coffee inside there. So essentially what we do is we have different profiles for all of our coffees, but we get the drum up to a certain temperature, and then we'll drop our green coffee in, and we roast it according to each profile for that specific coffee and origin. When it's ready, we'll release it. It cools off, and then we typically wait at least a day before we bag or throw any of that up on the bar. And for espresso, we try to wait at least 5 to 7 days just so that can completely degas and really shine as an espresso.
How do you source your coffee beans?
Yeah, so we work with a lot of different importers and exporters. Something that was really the biggest thing in coffee that really interests me is the sourcing process and the roasting process. So with sourcing, it's finding importers and exporters that are sourcing really high quality beans. They work directly with farmers at origin. They help improve the quality of the farm, the quality of the life at farm level, and build a sustainable supply chain. So that's one thing that any coffee we source, it has to be sustainable. It has to be improving the farm level. It has to be paying a fair price for the coffee, making sure that the farmer is actually getting their share of the price we pay. And obviously importers are taking a cut, exporters, all these different things, but making sure that a fair price is getting back to farm level, so that they can continue to produce quality coffee. So with that said, we work with various importers based in Baltimore. Since I got into coffee based in Southern California, I do have one importer out there. But one of the big things I want to do is really work with Baltimore-based importers and farmers and coffee producers at farm level to really showcase Baltimore's coffee scene and help grow it. So when we can, and what we typically do is use Baltimore-based importers, exporters, or farmers directly at origin.
How does Baltimore City kind of compare as a coffee town compared to other cities in the country?
I think it's growing. I think there's a lot of room to improve it. It's sort of weird. So even though I grew up here, my experience in coffee really didn't start until I lived out west in San Diego and really experienced coffee, not just in San Diego, but all up and down California, as well as sort of the Pacific Northwest, which is just a huge hub, the whole West Coast in general. So that's really where my experience started. I think what the West Coast does extremely well that is lacking back here in Baltimore and just in general on the East Coast is the education of the end consumer. I think the end consumer is much more knowledgeable about coffee practices, about sourcing, about sustainability efforts. And I think that's our job as roasters to be able to educate the end consumer and teach them about, coffee, just in general, not just, your typical cup of coffee, but really teach them how much goes into producing a cup of coffee and taking that all the way back to farm level. So I think that that's where the East Coast can really improve. That's one of our big goals as well, is to, not only grow our company, but to really grow the Baltimore coffee scene in general.
Yeah, that would be great for the community.
Yeah, exactly. And it starts with really knowledge share. That was something that whenever I reached out to either a roaster, an experienced barista, really anybody in San Diego, when I was really starting to get into it, they were always super welcoming. Roasters work together. And back here, what I've noticed is it's not as open. The knowledge share isn't about maybe this farmer that you're working with in Guatemala, for example, or talking about roast technique, just different things like that. That something that I'm trying to work on. And I have the green coffee buyer from Ceremonies actually coming by next week, and she's going to stop by and we're just going to roast together and sort of talk coffee and roasting theory and everything like that, and just sort of bounce ideas off of each other. So I think it starts with that, really connecting with other coffee professionals and then ultimately the end consumers as well.
That's great that you're doing that. When people are choosing their coffee beans, what should people look for?
Yeah, so it's not as, sort of black and white, I think, as an answer as maybe people want. Everybody has different palates. So, somebody's going to like something that's a typical coffee profile, sort of roasty, smoky, a bigger body coffee, versus, somebody like myself. I typically like lighter, more acidic coffees, brighter coffees that you can really taste sort of the brightness and acidity in it, as well as fruit and floral forward cupping notes. So that's something that, I look for. So for me, for example, I really like some bright African coffees, Ethiopian coffees in particular. But I really enjoy a big bodied Colombian or Brazil coffee that has typical chocolate notes to it. So it's really different. It's all personal preference. But what we try to do to sort of help with that, if somebody does come in and they're looking at our pour over bar or looking at our retail bags on the shelf and they're like, oh, I don't know which one to get. So, our baristas will just engage with them and ask them, hey, how are you making your coffees at home? What profiles do you typically like? And sort of walk them through the process and help them sort of go with the coffee that's either going to be outside their comfort zone, something that they're not used to, or if it is within their wheelhouse, and that's the one they want, and, it helps them pick that one. But again, it's really personal preference when it comes to.
What's a common mistake that people make when they're roasting coffee?
As home roasters or sort of, roasters like myself, what, I guess in general, would you be talking about sort of roasters like myself?
I was thinking more home roasters.
Okay. Yeah. So what I would say is just to really explore. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. I know, when I started, I know that my coffee sort of sucked at the beginning, but I was the only one drinking it, and it was to my profile, so it was all, pretty bright, really acidic, but I would play around with it, and that's something that I learned. I would start off by roasting quarter pounds, just so that I could have the same coffee. I would roast one super light just after first crack, one to sort of the full city, which is like a medium roast, and then one I would take to second crack, which is typically your sort of your more roasty profiles. So as you continue to roast in the roasting process, you're sort of losing the origin traits within a coffee and picking up more roast smoky profiles, in my opinion. So what I would do is I would just explore it a lot, and roast in smaller batches so that you can explore the same coffee in 2 or 3 different ways, and then sort of dial it in from there. And that's something that we do is whenever we get a new coffee at the shop, or we get samples, we'll go ahead and the first batches we always roast, and right after first crack we always pull samples every 15 seconds, and then after that we'll cup those and really identify where those cupping notes are that we like, and how we perceive that as a team, and then we'll sort of set our profile from there for that specific coffee.
What were some of the roasting challenges that you faced when you were starting out?
So my specific space, I'm in a super old building, and one of the issues we faced was I converted our roaster from a propane, which the previous owner of the roaster had it as, over to a natural gas. So I was facing a lot of just gas pressure issues within the roaster itself from a mechanical standpoint, as well as airflow issues. So it was sort of, my machine is really unique in that it's an older machine. There's not many of them left. It still works very well. It just has sort of these weird quirks to it that I've just learned to use it like that now. So it's not an issue, but really doing that at first. And I mean, I've had batches where the gas is cut out on us, and you end up losing $40, $50, $60 worth of green coffee because it just goes to waste. But it's unfortunate, but it's also it's part of it. The other thing is some of the first batches that I roasted on that, they just didn't come out right, and I didn't feel comfortable serving them. One of the big things is quality control, and really having a high quality product. And again, it sucked to throw out money specifically in the beginning, but you have to sort of set your quality and standards. So that's something that we really wanted to do, and have a good product. So it's a learning curve for everybody. It was a new machine I was working on. And so, it's from home roasting all the way up through huge commercial, roasting operations. You're going to have just different little things like that.
That's great that you didn't compromise your quality of the coffee.
Yeah, exactly. And for that specific batch, I remember it was a Kenyan, and it just was coming out like super grassy and underdeveloped. And I didn't know if it was just, I wasn't cupping, sort of my palate was off that day. So I asked 2 of my baristas to join me, and they were getting the same thing. And so, it sucked because it's like, I roasted it and it was all on me, but we eventually dialed that in. And that coffee, I actually reached out to the importer and just asked him about roasting methods that he used for that coffee, because I was having a really hard time dialing that Kenyan in, and I finally got it with the help from them. And we threw a lot more heat at it than what I initially was doing, and it turned out really well. And that was one of our good coffees, but we did run out of that a few weeks ago. So hopefully we'll get that back after the new year.